Okay, in this video we're going to cover how to go about extracting information from a georeferenced data set, and then also creating your own database in which you create temporary layers and additional information that you can store and use at a later time. Okay, so the first part of this exercise is start QGIS. Please note in my video in my previous series where I explained how you get access to these XYZ tiles. Please, if you haven't done so, please go and do that in the meantime. Okay, the first thing we need to do, and let's just start a new blank project. Okay, the first thing we need to do is just bring in some XYZ tiles. So OpenStreetMap is a great place to start, and I'm going to focus on a project we're busy doing in our second year group, which will be Future Africa. So the first part of the puzzle is to find out exactly where you're working. Okay, so I know that the site that we're using is this area over here. Once you've established the location where you're working, the next step is that you'll need to go and set your preferred geographical system. So please note that I have set this up in a previous video, but typically we're going to use the WGS, and you can simply copy this code and paste it here to find it as well. So if you're not sure, simply copy the code that I've used and then find the system. But if you are curious, if I just scroll back up to the top, please note that this library is it's extensive. This projected system is found in the Universal Transverse Mercator System, UTM. Okay, so this is a preferred system that we use just because it's in meters and it's more suited to what we're doing in the department. Please note, it doesn't matter. Pick the right system so you can export the information in the correct format, but it just means that if you need to translate this into other software, you've got some standards that we're working with, and I'll explain that in a later video. Okay, so just know that we're going to be working in the 35 South, and you can see we're working in that area. So if you press apply, this code should change here. So apply, press OK, this code should change. Okay, so just make sure that that adopts that new code. So I'm going to go and say I'm working with the 35 South, press apply. You'll see that this has changed now, 32. Okay, so that's the first part of the puzzle. Make sure that we're using the correct geographical system. Okay, so it will have to have the same code as this 35 South. So it has to be this code over here. Okay, all right, so now that we've got our correct system, the next thing we're going to do is bring in some aerial footage. We can actually get rid of this information for now. So we can actually remove this layer and bring in some aerial photographs. Okay, so I'm going to use the Esri aerial photographs. Okay, sorry, I did lose where I was, so let me just pull this back in. So we're in Pretoria. So I use the OpenStreetMap just to locate myself. I think it's the best. It's easy to find where you are. Okay, so let's just remove this quickly. Good. So we're working with Future Africa. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is bring in your aerial photograph and set it up in the right location. The next thing I want you to do is save this as a project. Save as. I'm going to save this in a central location, which I'll give you access to at a later time. But for now, just understand that I'm using a library or I'm using a database to store this. I'm going to go to projects, and here I'm going to go and add. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to call this Future Africa. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly get the. So let's just say Future Africa. I'm just going to all call this one name. I'm going to save this. Okay, so I've saved the project. Just means if the computer crashes or there's load shedding, you keep saving this information as you're working in the project. Very important. Okay, so these two steps I need to do. So in the previous video, I showed you how you exported this high-res image, etc., on a PDF. But now we're going to take this a step further. We're going to start creating data sets. So the first thing I'm going to do now is go and create a database. Okay, so I'm just going to remove this connection. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a database. I'm going to say create database. Now it's going to ask you where would you like to create a database. Please pick an appropriate location to create your database. Just think of it, it's a file structure that QGIS uses where you can put in different types of layers, etc., and save information too. Just note that these files can get quite large depending on the data sets that you use. Okay, so I'm just going to put this, I'm going to put this in my library. Remember, you can access this library as well. So I'm going to put this in projects. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it database, so I know I'm just going to call it data, and then here I'm going to just call this again. Just bear in mind when you are making these databases, don't use spaces. Sometimes the software doesn't like spaces in the name, so just bear that in mind because it's a database. Okay, so Future Africa. So I'm going to save the database. So what this will do, it'll create a database for me. Okay, just note that there's nothing in the database, and if I go refresh. So this database, you can always add new connections. So if you don't have a connection and you want to add this database of mine, you're going to go and say new connection. Then you can go navigate and find another database. So here I've got other databases that I've been creating in the past. So you can go and access all of these databases and extract information or add information to them. Okay, but I would recommend you make it your own and then you add data to it. So it's very easy to go and connect a database. All right. So why is it important to have a database? So typically when you're working with databases, if I'm going to go and say layer, so at the top here on the ribbon, I'm going to go to the layer tab and I'm going to say create layer. So I'm going to create a new geopackage layer. It just means that I can create information that will be housed in this database. So I'm going to go and say select a database. This is the one thing that you must just be careful of. You must always select the database that it must use. Very important. Okay, so BIM library. So I'm going to say GIS. Now I'm going to go to projects, Future Africa. So I'm going to tell it going forward, it must use this geodatabase. So use this geodatabase. But now I need to create some sort of, so we've got in the beginning where you're going to have points, lines, and polygons. Don't worry about multi-points. We rarely use this. This is more for advanced GIS users. I wouldn't bother using these. I'll use points, lines, and polygon. Okay, so for this exercise, I'm going to create a polygon. We'll need to create polygons. Make sure you select the correct geographical system. So you must say project. Default, please use this project. Okay, you must use the same as the project. I see the project had changed. I don't know why it's done that. So we must just double check. Okay, so before we go any further, press cancel. I don't know why this had changed. I think press apply. This should change. So just be very careful when doing that. Okay, I think the satellite system changed that. So just be very careful when doing that. Make sure that you're working in the correct so bring in your images and then make sure that this is set correctly, because sometimes I think when you load images it'll try and use this geographical system. So information, you can see this is using a different geographical system. So if you just go through let's go to source, sometimes it'll yeah, you see it's using another geographical system. So just be careful of that. It might set the work environment to that system, but just make sure we're using the correct one. Okay, so that is quite common, so just be careful. Alright, so let's just go to layer, create layer, new geodatabase, make sure it should remember where we were working with the previous one. What we're going to call this object, so let's just say polygon. I want to call this and make sure it uses the project. Don't worry about everything else, just keep it the same. Don't worry about tables, we'll get into it in a later video. I'm going to call this site extent. So first of all, I'm going to establish a site extent. This is very important. So I'm going to say add new layer. Now you'll see it will add it as a layer here, and if I go and refresh here, so on Future Africa, click and say refresh, you see it's added a new layer, but there's nothing in this layer. So select this layer and you're going to go to this edit icon. Now once you're in the edit mode, what you must make sure, if you click anywhere on one of these tabs, so right click on one of these tabs, you need to make sure that you've got the same settings as me. The one that probably was not on is the shape digitizer, so you'll need to switch that on, please. So right click, shape digitizer. You'll notice it's over here. You're going to need this to digitize shapes. Very important. Okay, so make sure that this is on. Sometimes it'll block it, it'll log it into there. So let me just show you. Sometimes it puts it over there, but you can move these around and put them where you need to. Okay, you can also switch them on and off as you need them. Okay, so that's also important to understand. Okay, so I might put this over here because there's a small little one here that's connected to something. I don't know what that's connected to. Anyway, you can maybe close that, whatever that is. Okay, so that was for something which I don't know. Anyway, sometimes, yeah. All right, great. So now I'm going to say, well, I'm editing the layer. There's a symbol with a pencil explaining that I'm busy editing this layer. So I'm going to go and click the new shape icon, and now you can either create lines. So if you go to the digitization, so this is how you can go and trace objects. You can go and trace objects, okay, make shapes, but we use CAD, so we don't have to use that tool that much. All that we've got to understand, sometimes we've got to designate an area in which we're working and go from there. So if you go to the shape digitizer, you'll see you get different options. I like to use the rectangle from extents. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, well, actually the site I'm going to be working is from there. So here, instead of clicking left click again, you're going to right click this time to end the command. Here you can give it a name. So just call this 01, it doesn't really matter, press OK. So you can see I've got a layer site extents and now it fills it in. So I'm going to simply save and close and stop saving. Now, what I'm going to do now is select the layer, right click, go to properties. Okay, once we go to properties, you'll notice that you can go to all symbols. So it gives you a whole library of symbols that you can quickly allocate a style to this layer. So I'm just going to say red outline. I find this is the most suitable. Okay, so what this does now is it designates a zone. So if I right click on the layer and I go zoom to layer, so if you are lost and you want to go back to where you're working, you can simply select it and go zoom to layer, and it'll take you straight back to where you're working. Okay, this is a great tool later on when we start cutting out information. Okay, so I've established my site extents. I'm happy with that. So you see I've got my site extents. At any point, if you lose the layer, if I remove the layer by accident, it's still going to be in my database. So you can simply select and drag it and drop it back in. Just note that it will lose its properties, its symbology, so you must just go through. Now, the more and more you use certain types, it will populate this with the symbology that you're using the most. I'm just going to make it red line again. Okay, great. So I've brought back the layer. I'm very happy. Now, in addition to identifying your own site, in this workshop, we're going to add a bit more information. We're going to access another database. We're going to pull in some contours, and we're going to rework those contours in a format that we can use as an image where we can export it and start producing some height elevation data. Okay, things like that. All right, so I'm going to create a new study area because I might want to do a study of this whole area. So I'm going to go to layer again, make sure that won't change because now we're working with the correct. So I'm going to say create layer. I'm going to create a new geo-reference layer. Make sure you use the Future Africa again. Now this one we're going to call so project study. Polygon, again it's a polygon. Remember, make sure that you're selecting the correct you have to select the correct georeference system every time, otherwise the information that you will extract won't work. I'm going to press OK. So I'm going to say add new layer. Now you'll see that in your database, if you refresh, you've got two layers now. Project study. Just remember there's nothing in this layer, so you have to do the same exercise. You're going to have to go to edit. Now once you've edited this or started the editing mode, we're going to go and say create shape. Same thing, rectangle, but it's kept my settings. So I'm going to go from there. I want to do a complete study, maybe a little more just off the heels here, just like that. Again, left click. You can call this 01, just give it a name. Otherwise it'll give it a name by default, so 01, doesn't matter. Again, symbology, properties, I'm going to use that red outline. But what's nice now is I can go and customize this, and you can start adding these. You can add these styles. Okay, so you can copy these, you can duplicate them, but you can add this. So once you've created this type of style, so a solid line, I'm going to make it a dashed line. And I'm going to simply remove the fill because I don't want fill. So where it says color and fill. Okay, so let me just see, that's great, press apply. Okay, because this has been set up not to have a fill already. So remember, it's not going to have a fill, but it's going to have a simple line as an outline. Great, I'm happy. Now you can go and save these styles. You can save this as a style and use it again. Totally up to you. I'm just going to press apply. Okay, I'm just showing you how you can differentiate between the two. So I'm going to go press save. Okay, great. Now sometimes I have noticed this one will disappear, but that's just because it's trying to write data back to the database. So if you go refresh, okay, you'll notice that that other one will reappear shortly. So don't worry about it at this point in time. You can switch it on, you can try and refresh it, but it is in the database, so don't stress about it. Okay, so cool. Now we've got a study area. So we've got a study area and we've got a side project area. If I go zoom to layer, it will actually zoom to the layer. It will actually zoom to the layer, but the layer will appear. So don't worry about that, it will come back. Okay, sometimes you can just simply remove the layer and bring it back in, but I've noticed with the database and the OneDrive, sometimes there's some issues and you can see that this thing is battling. So this is where the problem is. I can't sync this because it's in use. So sometimes what I do is I just pause syncing for a bit, for 2 hours, okay? Okay, I'm just going to pause the syncing for the time being because it'll keep the information on my, so that's why it's causing this issue. So you might just have to, you might just have to bear that in mind. And sometimes I exclude those, but then it won't back it up. So just, this is just because it's, okay, it's trying to sync this database. That's where the issue is OneDrive. So just bear that in mind. Okay, I would maybe work on a local drive and back that up, but you'll see once it starts trying to back up, it'll come right. Okay, so let me just go refresh. Another way to get around that, so let me explain this as well. What you can do to prevent this is to go to the location where this is. So I know it's in OneDrive, so let me just go there, OneDrive. Sorry, my OneDrive is really battling. Okay, BIM library. So I'm going to go to GIS. I'm going to go to projects, Future Africa. What you can do is click this option, always keep on this device. It just means that it'll never try and sync and back it up. Okay, so that way you can see that the database is battling to back up. So that's where the issue is at the moment. And that's a OneDrive issue. So what you could have done was pause syncing, make sure it's downloaded and then work. But you'll see it'll come right in a couple seconds. Okay. All right, so I'm quite happy with this result now. Now I want to go and add some more data because I've actually got access to a database where you can bring in a whole lot more stuff. Okay, so this will depend on how you've accessed my drive and if you've linked this as a favorite. Okay, but I'll explain this in a later video on how you go and access this database. Okay, but it's pretty straightforward. So if you're going to go to users and you've linked this to your OneDrive, you have to link this to your OneDrive, and I'll explain that. OneDrive, and I go to OKU, and I go to BIM library, and I go to GIS. Okay, so here in cadastral, okay, but I'm also going to give you this layer which will help you as well. So you can skip this step. This is more about if I've given you access to this database, you can pull this information. Now this cadastral information is for the whole of Pretoria, and if I go to contours and I pull in this contours file, just note that this is a very large file. These are all the contours for Pretoria. So it's a very large data set. Okay, so just be very careful with using this data. And you'll notice now that it'll add this to your project. So if we zoom in and I right click, I'm just going to stylize this information just so we see it better. I'm just going to make it a dashed red line, dashed black line for now. I'm going to make sure that the line weight's a bit thin. You'll notice now that I've got, that's two properties. Let me just revise that a bit. I don't like that dash line. It's too, you can make your own. So I'm not going to say, I'm going to not use a custom line. I'm just going to use a dashed one. So remember, you can create your own. So I'm going to make this more in line with how we view contours here. And you can see these contours now. I've got all of these contours for this area. But remember, this is too much data to work with. And I'll need to use this data wisely. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to clip the information that I need. I'm going to clip. So I'm going to go to vector now. So in the vector tab, I'm going to go to geoprocessing tools. I'm going to tell this I want to use the clip command. So now just read this carefully. This algorithm clips vector layers using the features of an additional polygon layer. Only the parts of the features of the input layer that fall within the polygon, remember polygon, of the overlaying layer. So project study area. So if I use this command and I press run, what it'll do, it will clip the relevant information that I need. So I can remove that layer now. So that's not polluting my whole drawing. So what I've managed to do now is I've managed to download all of the contours for my site in a couple of clicks, accessing a database. So here you can see, here's a drainage channel. So now this information is very useful to analyze your site conditions. So you can see I've extracted quite a lot of information here. At any point I can switch this off. I can use OpenStreetMap underneath this. Okay, so this is great. Again, properties, I'm just going to stylize this. Okay, but before we go any further, I want you to understand something. This layer is in the incorrect georeferencing system because it's come from another source. You'll notice that this is in the incorrect system. So this is the common system that surveyors use in South Africa, but overseas it's very complicated. It's not the right way. It just makes things very difficult if you're going to export this data to an AutoCAD file and use it in Revit. So we don't use this system if we're going to use it in Revit or other projects. So remember, this is still in the wrong system. So the first thing I need to do is go and reproject this layer to the correct system. So I'm going to go Vector, Data Management. I'm going to go Reproject Layer, and you can see it's a clip layer. I'm going to reproject this to the system that we're using now. So this clip layer I can now remove. Okay, now that we've got a reprojected layer, now in addition to this information we extracted, not only does it extract the line work, it also extracts the whole database. Okay, so all of the data associated to these lines, every single line has a data, and you can see each one has got an elevation assigned to it. So you can see this is the elevation above sea level, and this is the data that we need to get this information to work for us. Okay, now that I've reprojected our layer, the next tool we need to do, and now it gets a bit more complicated, but if you go to View, now we need to switch on a panel, and we need to go to Processing Toolbar. So this is a whole series of tools that you can use in GIS. A lot of them are loaded, are pre-built into the menus, but a lot of them are actually missing. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to make sure that this information that I'm looking at is actually in 3D. So I'm going to go to Z. I'm going to start typing Z. Now what we need to do is we need to set the Z value, and you can see Vector Geometry category. I want to go and set the Z value. So I'm going to say I want to, for this projected layer, you can manually assign a Z value, but if you click this icon here, I wanted to use the elevation part of the database to assign the Z values. So I'm going to go and say run. So all that this does now, so I can remove this layer because that's a temporary layer. Now I've got a proper contour model that is in 3D. So if I exported this to DXF, I'll explain this later. If you export this to another bit of software like Revit and you want to make this whole site, you've got the site information now. So if you exported this layer as a DXF and you imported this into Revit, you could build this terrain because you've got the contours. Okay. Now, before I continue, I'm going to rename this. And I'm going to add this to my database. All right. So once I've renamed it, what's great about this, you can simply drag and drop this to your database. So you can simply go and drag and drop this into Future Africa, give it a couple seconds. Okay, you'll see that this will disappear. So let's just go and say refresh. You'll see now that the contour layer has been added. Okay, so that's important. Remember, this is still temporary, but if I remove this and I pull this back in, guess what? There's my contours. Okay, so another way to do it is you could also go and say save, and you can say make permanent. Okay, so there's a way that you can make this a permanent layer, but it's already a permanent layer. Okay, so if it was a temporary layer, you could right click. You'll see there's another option here, make permanent or export as. Okay, but I'll get into that a bit later. Okay, so I'll show you that trick with this other layer that I'm doing. Okay, so you can see, and again I can extract the information. Again I can clip this again for this layer so that I've got contours just for the site rather for the whole project, because sometimes this is too much information. Okay, alright, now that I've got my contours, the next step is I'm going to use this information to create a DEM, a digital elevation model. This is very important if you're going to use this in other software, or you want to create a height map of what you're looking at here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the word TIN. Now, this is a tin surface, and it's usually in this section of the interpolation. So this is how you create a digital elevation model. A digital elevation is actually a raster that is an elevation model as well. We use this in other software when we want to create, so in Civil 3D, it's a quick way to create a an elevation model. Okay, it's more for surveyors. Now make sure that you're using the correct layer. Now this has Z values because we've assigned the Z values, and the Z values will be coming out of the elevation category. Now in addition, we're going to tell it, look at the points, because there are points in this line, and we're also going to tell it to look at the structural lines. So this vector layer, or this line layer in the database, contains points and structural lines. Okay, before we continue, we need to tell it how big this needs to be. So I'm going to say calculate from layer. I'm going to use the contour layer. Very important. Now at the resolution, this is very important. You can see if I created this image now, this image will be massive. So in essence, for accuracy purposes, I'll say let's work at a square meter. So 1 meter by 1 meter per pixel. Very important. Okay, that's something that we can quantify, and you can see it's going to give us. So you could maybe make it a little more or less. That's totally up to you, but I'm happy with this result. Okay, so once I've done all of that, I'm simply going to go and run the command. So this will take a couple seconds. Okay, now this digital elevation model, I'm going to export and save. So close that. Now this will take a bit of time for it to refresh and show in your view. So what this has done, it creates a digital elevation model for your site. So I can move this down. So now you see how the contours and this digital elevation model work together. So that's quite intuitive. Now just remember that this is going to be saved in the wrong format. So if I go right click and I go to properties, I go to information, the geographical system will be correct, but I'll need to save this and make it permanent. Okay, so I'm going to go file. So here you can see export, save. I'm going to save this layer as, I'm going to export this so I can use it. So I'm going to say raw data. That's all correct. You see that it's trying to guess. You can change the resolution, it doesn't matter. You can force it to be 1, but it'll try and keep that resolution. So just remember that. You're going to say it'll calculate from layer. Here we're going to save this in the right location. So I would put this information in the correct layer. Okay, so OKU. So I'm going to go to OQ100. BIM library, okay. So I'm going to go to BIM library. GIS. Okay, so I'm going to go to, that's good for now. Let me just double check. Yeah, so projects, I'm going to put this in Future Africa. Data, I'm going to put this information in here. Okay, so Future Africa data, I'm going to dump this in here. I'm going to call this DEM, Digital Elevation Model. Bang. Good. And you can add this layer. Yes, press OK. So what it'll do, it'll add the layer. We can get rid of this layer now, remove layer. Now remember, you've got access to this layer. It's important to save it in case you damage, because once it's in the file, you could damage this. Okay, you could damage this information. Okay, great. So first thing, contours, properties. I'm just going to fix this. So symbology, I'm going to go back. I'm going to change the line, a simple line. I'm going to make this a solid line. I'm going to change its color, make it dark or gray, totally up to you, something that's legible. Make this a dashed line. Okay, press apply. Bang. That's changed. I'm also going to add some labels now. In the beginning, don't worry about this. You'll see I'm going to add a single label. Now the single label is going to ask you what information you need to use. I'm going to say elevations for now. Okay, so elevation. Press apply. Okay, then I want to just put this in the right location. So placement, so I always put it parallel. I'm going to online, just like that. Text font wise, I'm just going to make this millimeters just so we know, and make this 2 millimeters or 2.5. Press apply, press OK. Now it will add these. One last little fine tune properties. It will add labels. Just remember they will be there. Now you want on placement, you want to repeat them. So you're going to say, I'm going to repeat these. So distance, repeating label, I'm going to make it every 100 meters. Press apply, press OK. So it'll repeat these every 100 meters along, because sometimes when you want more information, sometimes you won't see them, sometimes you need to repeat them so you don't lose which one's which. Okay, so you can see that the labels are there, they are visible. You can see now you've got the labels as well. Okay, sometimes you need to switch the labels off or leave them on, that's totally up to you. Okay, great, so we've made great progress. Remember in the other video you can use these DEMs on a different page. Okay, but I'm just going to focus on a DEM quickly. Okay, a digital elevation model. Alright, so I want all of you to go and create your own digital elevation model and save it. I want all of you to upload this digital DEM for me in the file that I'll give you. So when you export this, export save as, you're going to export these in a file that you need to, a designated folder that I will provide you with. Okay. But what's great about a digital elevation model is that you can go to symbology. So let's look at the hill shade option first, because this is a great way to read them, because you can actually see, you can see how it represents the information in a format that you can understand the topography, what's going on. You can see where there are little flat areas, where there are little channels. Okay, so this is a great way. You can see where there's valleys. So this is one option. Alternatively, if you want these colorized, what we do is we will then use the single brand pseudo color. Okay, so we can use these, but here I'm going to create a new ramp, because you can, so I'm going to designate a new ramp. So I'm going to go and say create new ramp color. Okay, I'm going to say catalog, press OK. Then you're going to have to give it a couple seconds. This is designed for doing these hill shades. Okay, then you're going to say I want to see topography, so just go and say topography, and the two ones that we use the most are these down here. Okay, so I'm going to say that one. I'm going to press OK. Now just make sure that you classify. So I'm going to go classify, so it classifies all the different colors, so it uses the full spectrum, so you can see what the different spectrums are. Okay, so that's precise label. This is just how many, so you can change this to 0. So if you go and say classify now, you see we're only getting in the meters now, so that's important. You can see it'll show you the different intervals. So label precision, interesting. Okay, I'm going to press apply. So what this will do, it will change this map into a different series of color. So it's showing you what's low and what's high. Okay, you can see the height spectrum, so the gray information is very high, that's very low, and we can switch on our contours now. So now you can really see this information. It's a great study, and you can fully understand how the values work. Okay, so say now this is the information I want to put on a page now. We've done this exercise before, but I'm just going to quickly run through this very quickly and explain how you use this. Okay, so now that I've got this, straightforward. Okay, I'm going to go to sheets. So I'm going to create a new sheet. I'm going to put this on an A3 maybe. Remember, there's an exercise on an A1, totally up to you. So I'm going to go A1. I'm going to go right click. Okay, it's an A1, page properties, but just say you wanted A3 for argument's sake. A3, portrait, totally up to you. Okay, now I'm going to pull this map on. So now I'm going to go and say add map. Just remember here, add map. Now with the map, when you pull in a map, so item properties, I'm going to change the scale to 1 to 5,000 maybe. Let's see if it'll fit. Okay, 5,000, no, maybe too big. So let's just select here again, just make it 10,000. Oh yeah, and I'll explain themes a bit later, so 10,000. Guys, this is how you work accurately. New scale bars every time. So say now 10,000, let's make it 20,000. Okay, so now 20,000. Okay, remember, I'm going to use this, so I can move the map. I'm going to go back to this tool, and then I'm just going to crop it so that I can see what I want to see. Just, this is tricky to get right, so the cropping of it, so just remember, make it 20,000 or 15,000. That'll be good. I think 15,000 is good. Okay, so I'm going to move this down. Move this more. Okay, so now this is the information I'm just doing a quick study of. I want that on my sheet. That's an image at 15. Okay, so I could make the whole, I could make this 10,000. Okay, I'm going to grab these and pull these guys out a bit. So let's drag that a bit better. Just remember it's messing up the scale. Make it 10,000. Okay, I'm happy with this. So I'm going to then use this command, move the information in. Okay, great. Now, because this layer has, I can pull in, I can create little legends based off this map. Okay, so let me explain. So if you go to legends, add legend, and I'll drag and drop. Now it'll pull in the legend, and you can see it'll pull in the legend of everything in my layers. So it'll show me the band. These you can go and edit in more detail. Now on the legend itself, okay, so I'm going to go and say, well, actually, I just want the band information. I want this band information. So legend, I'm going to say auto update. So I don't want, all I want is, so I'm going to minus that. I'm going to minus that. I don't need that. I just want that. Minus. Okay. So that's a legend. You can change what you see. Doesn't give you a lot of, you can change the title. Okay, but I just want this guy, so. Okay, but you can say show. But that's just telling me the band color. So when I read this map, the colors, it's just showing me the band color, but you can go and create these own legends somewhere else, but it does give you some basic, it gives you some basic information that you can then move around. Okay, so you can move these things around, put them on your drawing. Okay, sometimes you can remove the background. Yeah, just, so maybe if you switch off the background, you can put these in. Okay, but you might want the background. That's totally up to you. Okay, so these you can go and classify more, but this is a bit tricky, especially with these objects. So just, yeah, you're going to have to play around a bit with this. Okay, all right, show items inside. Sometimes it'll work. But I mean, for now, you can see I've got a height map. Great, so this is actually quite neat what you can do. You can produce height studies of your site. Okay, guys, for this exercise, I want you to create an A3 sheet with your height map stylized as per this example, and I want you to export this. So export this A1 information like this. I want you to export this data for me, okay, and upload this to a folder that I'll provide. Okay, so I'm just going to export this as PDF. I'm going to put it on my desktop. So remember, it's going to be, just check the naming convention, but it'll be beam and then your student number. Okay, I'm just going to save this on the desktop, just like this, export. Okay, remember you can use this information in GIMP, so you can extract this information in GIMP and do a lot more with it in GIMP. Okay, so I'm just going to open up the PDF. So here you can see I can read the contours, so that's great. I can see where the hips and valleys are. Alright, so this is a great workflow. Okay, guys, if you're getting stuck, please let me know.